Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we are diving into something that's shaking up American education, microschools. Now, when you hear that term, you might picture these tiny, exclusive private schools. A lot of people do. But the reality is actually way more interesting, and honestly, it might just change how you think about school itself.
So just think about this for a second. What if school wasn't this rigid, one-size-fits-all thing? What if, instead, it was built from the ground up to fit what your specific child actually needs? That question, right there, is the heart and soul of the entire microschooling movement.
So what is a microschool, really? Well, the big report, American Microschools, a sector analysis, gives us this definition. And the key words here are innovative and created around the specific needs. It's not just about being smaller. It's about being intentionally designed, starting from scratch for individual kids. That makes it a totally different animal, not just a shrunken-down version of a traditional school.
And don't make the mistake of thinking this is just some niche thing happening in a few big cities. No way. This is a full-on nationwide movement. And the scale of it is, well, it's pretty surprising.
That's right. The American Microschools report confirmed it. They are up and running in all 50 states and Washington, D.C. From major cities to really rural towns, this idea is popping up everywhere. It just goes to show you how much demand there is for this kind of personalized education.
Okay, so whenever you hear alternative education, I know what you're thinking. The first thing that comes to mind is probably the cost, right? The assumption is always that private or different automatically means expensive. But here's our first surprising truth, and it kind of flips that idea on its head.
Take a look at this number, $10,000. That's the annual tuition cutoff for the vast majority of microschools in the entire country. And I'm willing to bet that for a lot of families, that number is much, much lower than they would have guessed.
And that $10,000 figure isn't some outlier we picked. As you can see right here, it's the ceiling for most of them. A full 74%. That's nearly 3/4 of all microschools have tuition at or below that level. So affordability isn't the exception here. It's pretty much the rule.
And they take it even a step further. It's not just about that sticker price. Incredible 65% of these schools offer things like sliding scales or discounts. They're actively trying to make it work financially so more families can join.
So if they're so different when it comes to cost, it kind of makes sense that their whole philosophy would be different too. And that brings us to how they measure success, which is another huge break from the way things are normally done.
On one side, you've got the system we all know, right? The A's, B's, and C's. But then look at the microschool approach. They lean into things like observation-based reporting, portfolios that actually show a student's work and progress, and tracking when a student has truly mastered a concept, not just passed a test. It's about showing what you know, not just getting a letter grade.
And the data on this is wild. You want to guess how many microschools still use those traditional letter grades? Only 29%. That means over 70% of them have decided to move on to something more holistic, something more individualized. They're not just teaching differently, they're valuing different things.
So what are they prioritizing instead? Well, according to the data, things like children's happiness and future skills and non-academic growth, these are at the top of the list. It shows a real belief that a successful education creates a kid who is happy, well-rounded, and capable, not just someone with a 4.0. Okay, this all sounds great. But it leads us to the single biggest question of all, right? With all this focus on happiness and skills, what's happening with the academics? Do these kids actually learn as much? The data here is, well, it might be the most surprising thing we've talked about yet.
81%. I just want you to let that number sink in for a minute. That is a massive figure, and it points to something really, really powerful happening inside these small learning environments.
So here's the full story behind that number. And this is a direct quote from the analysis. Among the schools tracking this stuff, 81% of them reported that their students achieved between 1 and 2 years of academic gains in a single school year. Let me say that again. They're seeing up to double the learning in the same amount of time. It's incredible.
So when you put all of this together, the affordability, the focus on the whole child, and these academic results, the picture that emerges is clear. This sector is more accessible, more holistic, and shockingly effective. Let's just quickly pull these surprising truths together one more time.
So let's just break it down. 1. Microschools are way more affordable than most of us assume. 2. They measure success differently by focusing on the whole child, not just a grade. And 3, and this is the real kicker, this approach seems to be delivering supercharged academic growth.
And that, ultimately, is what this whole thing is about. It isn't about a single curriculum or one way to teach. It's a movement built on a shared set of values. Flexibility in how kids learn, real involvement from families, and just an absolute, unwavering focus on the individual child.
And all of this really leaves us with one final big question. As we search for better ways to get kids ready for the future, you have to wonder, in a world that's always telling us that bigger is better, could it be that the real future of education is actually small? Thanks for watching The Explainer.